So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the GEO 2022 Virtual Symposium and the session on harnessing the power of inclusive voice in GEO. My name is Justyna Nicinska. I am based at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and I also serve on the GEO Program Board representing the United States. It is my pleasure to be your moderator for today's session. The ability to successfully utilize Earth observations to solve humankind's most challenging problems occurs when there's a sense of belonging for all individuals that enables them to share ideas, experiences, as well as to foster innovative solutions. However, attracting and retaining participation by a diversity of people from all sectors and regions and backgrounds can be challenging for a global, broadly scoped and diverse network like GEO. The Program Board Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion subgroup developed the GEO Statement on Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion in 2021 in consultation with the GEO community. The statement was approved by the GEO plenary in November. The 5 pillars of which you see of the EDI framework you see listed here as a foundation for achieving this inclusive vision. This session, which is organized by GEO's Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion subgroup, will highlight how various GEO initiatives and groups have been successful in attracting a diverse set of people and contributions. These case studies will be used to open a discussion on how GEO could better support and strengthen the development of a more dynamic, diverse, and inclusive Earth observation community in which everyone is given the opportunity to participate and benefit. Our panel today includes 6 diverse speakers who will share with you the experiences and views on promoting EDI across GEO. This is especially important as we look to develop the 2023-25 GEO work program and look to the future and vision of GEO for its next phase. For our session agenda today, there will be 6 short presentations and questions will be followed by a facilitated discussion. The discussion will mention whenever possible tools, courses, and other resources that the GEO work program activities can leverage to implement or leverage or increase EDI. We will also pose 2 interactive poll questions to the audience. The introductory poll question will be followed by presentations, and at the end, a concluding poll will be asked, and we will share the results of those polls at the end of the session. So for everyone, please answer the question, which is in one word, what does equality, diversity, and inclusion in GEO mean to you? And this poll will be open for a few minutes. So just to review with you real briefly, the session protocol, which really is just to change your name as indicated to provide your organization as well. Please mute your audio unless you are speaking. For the Q&A and discussion portions, please type your questions in the chat. The intervention will be directed either to a specific speaker following their presentation or to the full panel during the discussion portion at the end. As I mentioned, there'll be 2 interactive polls, and we ask you to participate in those as we're really looking forward to your input, and we will be sharing the results at the end. So our first speaker is Bente Bye, who is the CEO of BLB based in Norway and has been a member of the GEO community since 2004. Bente will be speaking to us about EuroGEO and attracting a diverse set of people and contributions. Bente, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Justyna. Are you operating the slides, I guess?
The GEO Secretariat is, yes.
Okay, yes. So I will start by describing very briefly the landscape. So the next slide, please. Well, first, I will say that we will focus here on the human factor of our activities in GEO and EuroGEO. And I will introduce a few framework program examples, but also talk about citizen science and the hackathons. Next slide, please. Yeah, so first I will describe very briefly the landscape in EuroGEO. EuroGEO is special in the sense that we have the European Commission representing a large subset of the European countries in Europe, and also participating organizations. And there we have contributions then from both the European Commission and countries individually, and of course the participating organizations in the GEO work program. And I have included here a few examples, important examples from contributions from Europe is the Copernicus program, We also are guided by the INSPIRE directive and by some policies. In this case, I used the gender equality strategy that is by the European Commission, but many of the countries also have similar strategies and policies that guides us. And I also have included some statistics just to illustrate that was still, particularly in our fields in GEO, I would say, where we rely so much on technology as a tool, there's definitely not quite equality yet. So you can look at that, those slides later. And what we are talking about, the landscape here, is going from a collection of Earth observations and bring them all the way to a value for use. It could be services, it could be science, it could be operational or policy input. So that's the Earth observation value chain. Next slide, please. So the examples I will choose is here from Horizon 2020. We will talk about then co-design. How do we attract a diverse set of people? It's just by looking at how you design this huge project. You will see there's a diverse set of people, both ages, roles, etc. And in NextGeos is an example of how we are using pilots to, we were using pilots to help design data hub and platform, and there's a methodology for that, a co-design methodology for that. In eShape, we are another project. We look at how they are actually looking to, they are developing a co-design methodology, so going deeper into each of the pilots or showcases, if you like. And then a brand new one we started this February is Iliad, is building the digital twin of the ocean. And they will, we will, I'm part of that project, use the experience from the two prior NextGeos and Iliad to create a very own co-design, a way of attracting and including people to build a digital twin of the ocean. So we looked in NextGeos, as I said, we were building a data hub on a platform, and we had this onboarding step by step from the user engagement all the way to operational service. And we mapped out the very detail in each step and identified so-called personas. Again, human factor. Really, when you're looking at co-design, you have to see the persons, the personalities and their roles, their various roles. And we were doing that in order to create this onboarding process. And we used this set of pilots. All of these pilots are also contributions to GEO. Now in eShape, they are also contributing to the social benefit areas that we have in GEO. 7 of them here you see listed here. And they are going deeper into the pilot user relationship. They are really analyzing the relationship and focusing on the relationships. And by looking very detailed at each of the pilots, they were extracting 2 types, a quick fit type of actions where interactions, and also a more resilient fit interaction, I will call it. And apologies for the language to eShape here, but this is my understanding that they were using this different approaches. Sometimes you really need to go very quickly. Other times you want to be more resilient, in the sense here is that you allow multiple pathway from the starting point to the goal. And this is very much what we are also doing in the GEO work program. So there's a whole set of methodology that can be offered to the GEO community through eShape. eShape is a major also contribution from Europe to GEO. And then the citizens observatories. The citizens observatories are quite unique on a global scale. Citizen science is popular around the globe. We even have a community activity in the GEO work program. Now, the citizens observatories It's providing a framework for collaboration, freer collaboration, and it's you see here as the latest set of citizens observatories. Note that We Observe is sort of an umbrella for the citizens observatories, and they made a toolkit that helps you create your own citizens observatory, and that includes how all the things that you need to do. It includes also how you will engage, how you can engage with citizens. So anybody could actually be part of using Earth observations. The same for Action, another European project, where they are looking more as the science part and how science-led processes can be more participatory, inclusive, and led by citizens. So there's a toolkit that we can benefit from here as well. And then there's this hackathons. The Inspire hackathon, and the Inspire is actually then referring to the Inspire directive, as I mentioned in the beginning. And it consists of a series of collaborative events for developers, researchers, and designers, and others. It's very, very open. It's led by Plan for All, one of the participating organizations in GEO. This is just a subset of all the Inspire hackathons that has been organized, and it provides a continuity and sustainability. So it's part of supporting creating a community where people actually can relate to each other. And I highlighted here that capacity development is an important part of attracting people and being inclusive. And I would like to highlight that we actually also provide through the hackathons a possibility to collaborate and include people from both Europe and Africa. So we had a Nairobi Inspire hackathon and a Kampala, and it's going on beyond what I show here as well. So that was it from me. You can please contact me if you are interested in more information about all these activities. I will provide a link to a webinar that sort of summarizes all these co-design methods that I mentioned initially. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bente, for that presentation. That was very interesting. You provided some great examples of capacity development along with co-design. I do have a question for you. Which is based on your experience in EuroGEO of these examples, what advice would you give to other GEOs for attracting a diverse set of people and contributions?
Well, again, the human factor. I think being transparent, so making it easy for those who don't know us, don't know the project, don't know GEO, to get the information that they need. And having people to talk to that is like concrete, that is not only something you find on the web page, but you can actually contact somebody to get involved. I think this, particularly the Inspire hackathons is a good example for that, in terms of attracting people that is totally random, right? That doesn't have any connection with GEO or whatever you're doing beforehand.
Thank you, Bente, for that. For anyone who else has questions for Bente, please put them in the chat. We'll be now moving on to our next speaker. So next slide, please. And our next speaker is Professor Stuart Marsh from the University of Nottingham in the UK. Stuart is also a member of the GEO Program Board representing the UK and is a member of the EDI subgroup. Stuart will be speaking to us about the diversity in GEO, a regional GEO perspective. Stuart, please, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here, taking part in this important session. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a little bit of feedback from some work we've been doing in the EDI group to work with the 4 regional groupings in GEO and to explore with them the EDI statement, their views on it, and how they're reacting, changes they're perhaps starting to bring in, as a result of this initiative in EDI. And to have those conversations, we decided that we would start out by picking on 3 particular areas of EDI: gender, geography, and the career stage of a researcher. We felt these were possibly some of the more important ones in GEO. On gender, we felt that a bias still remains probably, but that quite a lot is being done to address it. And we knew that there were some good initiatives going on in each region on gender. Geography, we're going to have to look at the chart of where the different GEO participants are located to know that we have a mixed picture still in terms of the geography. And career stage, I don't know about you, but I sit in many GEO meetings and I see many kind of middle and late career people. And perhaps there's been a lack at times of earlier career people being welcomed in to make their contributions. And so that's a potential weakness. And we wanted to have a look at that. We wanted to know whether perhaps travel budgets were being held by more senior staff, and sometimes more junior staff were not getting a look in. So those were the 3 areas that we decided to start off the conversation about. Now I'm going to just go through 4 slides, the rest of the talk, that will just give you a flavor of what came out of each of those discussions in the 4 regions. So next slide, please. EuroGEO. So on gender, they felt like they were making some progress, particularly at the level of the chair, where it was 50% in balance, but that when you went further down the structure, task leads, for example, only 2 out of 12 were female. So work remains to be done there. On geography, they've been doing a pretty good job spreading their meetings around and making sure that their meetings cover a wide, diverse range of settings within their region, particularly the workshop series and also training. Both came up as having a good spread. So that was a positive. Career stage, they've tried to focus the training on younger scientists as a way of getting them more involved. And they're now considering setting up a young scientist task group to sort of follow up on those that have been trained and get them integrated into the process. So that was the sort of things that came out. Oh, I'm going backwards for some reason. There we go. That was what came out of the 3 main points we wanted to discuss. But I just wanted to touch on, were there any other issues that came up? And the main issue that came up from this regional grouping was language, as being a sort of a 4th pillar to consider. Many languages spoken in the region, obviously, and only high-level scientists tend to speak English. So that was something that they felt needed to be addressed going forward. And we'll see language come up several times. Next slide, please. AfriGEO. It was felt in AfriGEO that there was always an imbalance in gender, and we had some discussions about how this is reinforced by educational bias, by sometimes patriarchal communities, and we noted that there's big differences between the cities and the rural areas in this regard. So definitely still some work to do there. On geography, a mixed picture, but lack of representation from Southern Africa, for example. Also some economic groupings, so getting parts of Africa talking to other countries that felt they were more aligned with a Middle Eastern kind of bloc. That was a barrier that needed to be overcome. And on career stage, it was definitely felt that senior and middle ranking staff were sent to meetings and that early career professionals struggled to be involved. So those issues all resonated in the case of AfriGEO. In terms of other issues, it was quite interesting. A couple of things came up. They're starting to think about how they can do more to involve disabled staff. And so that was another area that they wanted to raise and talk through with us. And a really interesting one was inequitable availability of the internet. And, you know, in these 2 years, when almost all our meetings have been online, not having good internet access is a major barrier to taking part in GEO. And, you know, that is something that was felt quite keenly in the case of AmeriGEO. So it's one we hadn't thought of beforehand, but definitely something worth considering. Next slide, please. EuroGEO, on gender, they felt like the situation was quite positive in Europe, largely because there are gender guidelines issued by the EC. Many of the projects are EC projects and have to follow the gender guidelines that the EC issues. National governments often then reflect those gender guidelines in their own documents. And so it was felt like there was quite a positive framework for gender within Europe. Geography, one issue that was highlighted was indigenous people, such as those in the Arctic, getting a good level of involvement. And some of the more outlying areas of Europe was seen to be a challenge. And career stage. So bias towards 40 plus was a phrase that was used in the discussion, definitely felt to be an issue. But there was an improvement, that there were more young people getting involved, particularly through their involvement in European projects. Language was briefly mentioned as another issue, particularly perhaps those coming from Eastern Europe more than perhaps Western Europe. But it wasn't felt to be quite as big an issue as had been mentioned in some of the other regions. So AmeriGEO. When we started the conversation, they felt like they'd been through a big change over the last 4 years, where things like gender weren't talked about 4 years ago, but they are now. And while progress had been made, one of the things they were really keen to do was collect some hard data on the topic, but there were barriers to collecting those data. So the picture that they had of these biases, they felt was incomplete. In terms of geography, they had quite an interesting take on it. They've been focusing on individuals and trying to go beyond using the same people. So, you know, it's very tempting. You've got a new initiative coming up. I might think to myself, oh, Bente would be good for that. But I should be thinking, no, Bente's already doing enough. There's somebody else who can be doing this new initiative. And so they were using a focus on a diversity of individuals also to try and open up the geography, which I thought was quite an interesting take on it. In terms of career stage, that was something they had been able to collect data on, and they've used those data to set up a dashboard. And the really nice thing about this is that they've got a bunch of students working on it to maximize the information that's extracted from it. And of course, in doing so, they're actually involving more early career people in the work of GEO. So I thought that was a very nice example. When we talked about other issues with AmeriGEO, one thing that we hadn't thought about was trying to involve a diversity of organization types. So not all government organizations, but getting industry involved, getting academia involved, getting consultancies involved, and so forth. This was felt by AmeriGEO representatives to be very important in order to prevent a kind of a groupthink from setting in. If everyone's from government, they all tend to think in a similar way, and the discussion can go down a very predictable path. And you can disrupt that and bring in new thinking by having different types of organizations involved in the discussion. So that was a very interesting take on diversity that, you know, the EDI group had not thought about before, and it's something we're going to give some attention to going forward. They also mentioned language. They've been quite active in that area, and they feel that there's more to do. So that just gives you a snapshot, a flavor of what's going on across those different areas, and I'll finish there. But obviously I can take any questions through the chat as the meeting progresses.
Thank you, Stuart, for a comprehensive review of what's going on within each regional geo, and similarities and differences between each are very interesting. We do have one quick question from Kathy Fontaine. You had mentioned the mid to late career stages being favored, but Kathy is actually asking, how do you characterize more mature folks who have changed careers, early or mid?
Well, that's a great question, Kathy. I think we don't have data really on what we mean by this career stage. So we sort of picked it out as something we had a feeling about from just being sat in meetings. But in fact, of course, in detail, you don't know the details of someone. They might be relatively, let's say, old, to pick a phrase, but it might be new to them. They may have had a major career change. So that is a very valid point. And short of asking everybody what their particular stage in life is, it would be a difficult thing to do. So I think we have to look where we've got some data. And AmeriGEO, the guys who've been collecting it, and they've got this dashboard, they've also indicated that they would be willing to run a seminar on the topic if that was of interest more widely across GEO. So I think maybe those guys should be answering the question and not me, but perhaps that's something we can look to set up later this year as part of another GEO event and get them to talk on that topic, because I think it's a very valid point that you've raised, Kathy.
Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate that. Appreciate the presentation and the answer. Our next speaker is Ms. Ummul-Kulthum M, who is a bachelor degree student from the Information Technology Management at the State University of Zanzibar. She is also part of their Digital Earth Africa initiative. She will be presenting to us today on including women to preserve mangroves of Zanzibar. Ummul, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. And I do apologize for being late. Also, I'm facing some problems here in my computer about the file in uploading. So I will upload it soon. So I will start first. Can you allow me that? Well, my name is Ummul-Kulthum M. I'm a student taking a degree of Information Technology and Management at the State University of Zanzibar. And I'm glad here today to be representing this topic. I'm representing my teacher, Dr. Khairia Mudrik Masood. She got some emergency, she couldn't do it. So I will be representing for her on behalf. And today I will be talking about the inclusion of women in preserving mangroves in Zanzibar. We, Digital Earth Africa Club at SUSA there are dealing in different things. And speaking of inclusion of women in preserving mangroves, there are a lot of things have been done and it helped a lot. And there are some here like Digital Earth Africa is helping women in Zanzibar fight the effect of climate change. We use youth mappers to help us collecting data so as to get that. And also it protects the island's precious mangroves habitat that are surrounding that's coastal areas. Also, it provides the analysis ready data, which is over 30 years in use. The people are using those data for analysis, for decision making, and so on. It also helps provide awareness to the community. Those community, because of this Digital Earth Africa, they become aware. They learned, accepted, adapted, and even attempt to preserve mangroves and environment in general. Also, it helps to emphasize the role of the mangrove to the society. They get to know it. They get to know why the mangrove, why should they preserve it? So Digital Earth Africa is helping us much. Also, it helps to work with youth mappers in identifying hotspot areas. The inclusion of women in preserving mangroves has made many things and in great ways. The analysis on the Digital Earth Africa allowed the community to obtain important insight that they can apply directly to their conservation efforts, such as protecting and restoring mangroves. Here in Zanzibar, women, we young ladies, youth mappers, and other conservation groups build community awareness around the importance of mangroves forest is a way to demonstrate the impact of climate change on the island. We are being monitored by Dr. Khairia. Ms. Khairia started the State University of Zanzibar Digital Art Africa Club of students. And fortunately, I got to be one among those. I'm a communication person over there, and I'm very glad to be there. It's enabling our future leaders and sustainability of the that GEO issues. And now we are starting being much experienced in different impacts of Digital Earth Africa and GEO in general. Susan now has over 120 graduate students who did the Digital Earth Africa 6-week training program. And as uptake continues in Africa here, we are delighted to see that this program is being implemented into the learning program as a part of it in the State University of Zanzibar. Also, we would like to get more training, more assistance, and more encouragement on it. Yeah, Digital Earth Africa is committed to empower women and men in using platform so as to make informed decision. As we say, we leave no one behind. Thank you, and that's all.
Thank you for that presentation, Ummul. It's definitely a great illustration of the need to include women, but also the need to include youth. We very much appreciate it. I do have a question for you, which is based on your experience in Tanzania. How do we best co-design projects to include a diversity of stakeholders and ensure a balanced perspective across communities, including underrepresented ones?
Yeah, well, that is a question. And of course, we need an answer. Actually, for what I experienced from I myself, my fellow student, people in the community, my sisters, my family, is that many people have no idea or knowledge about what is GEO, what is the importance of Digital Earth Africa, or what is important of geographical information system. So regarding to that, we would like to recommend, or I would like to recommend on behalf, we should do more training and as usual to include those women in participation, like creating session like this, not just once, but periodically and more. So it's to make us familiar with doing it. And in making us more experienced, there should be more assistance, like creating those activities that can include us women in participating in different GEO activities, like doing session like this or mapathon or practices, works, testing works, and so on. I think they're gonna be help. They're gonna be a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ummul. I think it's an excellent point, linking capacity development to these efforts as well, and how important that is. And hopefully we can touch on that point again in the presentation. Thank you. So our next speaker is Florian Franziskakis, who's been working with the GEO Secretariat since 2019, where he is involved in the technical development of the GEO Knowledge Hub. And he will be speaking to us today about the GEO Youth Community of Practice, how to advance GEO's inclusion of young voices. Florian, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Justyna, and hello to everybody. Thanks for inviting me to this session. So I will speak briefly about the recent GEO's efforts to increase youth engagement. I have to note that previously to 2022, there have been efforts in the community to involve young people and early career scientists, namely through working with youth mappers. We have heard some examples before. Also, there have been some indigenous hackathons that have been reaching out to many students and young people. We also have some networks and connections, including the Water Youth Network that is an associate participating in GEO, and other effort with, for instance, humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. Lately, there have been a feeling that we need to step up and to engage in a more systematic way with young people, both on the technical side, but also on policy relevant areas. So in order to include this new generation and to have this to have GEO being a leaving no one behind, we felt we needed to engage in a more systematic way. Next slide, Rick, please. One initial and big step that we took was to organize a dedicated youth track at the last GEO week in 2021 in November. This was a dedicated series of 4 events throughout the week that was aiming at providing a space to exchange on youth engagement within GEO members, organizations, and activities. Because, and we have seen in earlier presentations here also in the regional GEOs, there was a sense of a need to be more inclusive towards early career scientists. So we had 4 different sessions, including 2 cross-regional dialogues between the different regions. These involved 20 different speakers, not only young people and early career scientists, but also we're including more senior professionals, GEO work program activity leaders, and GEO principals, so country representatives. This was done in the spirit of not just being an youth only event, but to really exchange practices and see how we can better engage those at all the levels of GEO. It was a good opportunity to exchange experience that young people have felt, but also to promote some programs on the national scale that have been put in place in the area of geographic information systems, in Earth observations, and in all the policy side of it, coming from the knowledge that we have in the work program. One big outcome of this youth track was the assessment of the needs and the willingness to participate in a more formalized body, which is the GEO Youth Community of Practice. So the outcomes of the youth track have helped shape this community of practice, and we have come up with terms of reference and objectives that we would like to have for this year. Next slide, Rick, please. So we have a few objectives that we want to advance on in this year, and it has been starting, and I will show after that what are the future steps. But just so that everybody is aware, we don't aim at being a new network, but rather connecting existing youth networks and organizations to our work program activities, which make the great value in an organization such as GEO. Also, something that was emerging from this youth track is the need to foster and to create more opportunities to link with the private sector for more inclusive, more inclusion of young people in the private sector. And one idea was to link with the industry track at the next GEO week to have a dedicated dialogue on that. Not to have only senior people involved in that, but also to show what opportunities are for young people. Another one is about making young people during the GEO events more visible, give them more voice, which was done with the youth track, but we need to do that in a more systematic way, and not just in the youth track sessions, but in all sessions, and to give the voice to other people. And this is something that we will see more and more. Finally, not only to give them visibility during events, but also to give recognitions for what they do and what they have done. For instance, this could be in the shape of a dedicated award, and this is something that was strongly coming out of the youth track. So these objectives were coming from the community requests. And if you go, Rick, to the next slide, please. Some future steps about thematic webinars. that will bring together GEO work program activities and existing youth networks to share experience, but also to see if there is collaboration to be established, as this is what GEO is all about, to coordinate and to connect people. And finally, also to organize the youth track at the GEO Week 2022 that will be held in Ghana. I will end now by just saying that this is a welcoming environment and everybody is welcome to join. So you can just contact me. I'll put my email address in the chat and we will contact you, because I think this is something important to, and no matter what your career stage, your age, or where you're from, you're all welcome. We specifically did not put a limit, an age limit to participate in this, because we want this to be more of an exchange than, and so, yeah, please, everybody is welcome to join. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Florian, for that presentation. I think that really showed us how we're trying to fill those gaps in terms of youth engagement that we're talking about throughout here, and how to get diverse sectors involved, and how to also leverage additional networks within GEO. I do have a question for you, which is, you mentioned how people should engage, but what would you say is the best way for young people and others who are interested to engage in GEO? Who can they reach out to? How do they get heard and involved, perhaps especially if they're not already engaged? Thank you.
Thanks, Justyna. So a couple of ideas here. So just if you want to join the youth track, please contact us at the GEO Secretariat. But more on a general sense of, if you want to engage, and if you're working in a field that is related to GEO in an organization, you should not hesitate to reach out to your management and to people that either are already linked to GEO or are not. And do not hesitate to share your ideas. I would say just dare do the things that you would like to see. Don't hold back your ideas, because even this is more for the young people. If you are working for this organization, you are a part of it, and you're legit, and you should not hold back the ideas and the projects that you would like to see. And so this is in the spirit of GEO, right? We welcome everybody. So yeah, I would say do not hold back. Thanks.
Thanks, Florian. That is definitely reflective of the inclusive spirit that we want to have here. So now moving on to our next speaker, that will be Kremer. She is currently working as a contractor for USGS in the Office of International Programs, and has been engaged in capacity development projects and community engagement initiatives with AmeriGEO partners in Peru. And she'll be speaking to us today about the Peru Mapathon in 2021. With that, Bert, the floor is yours.
All right, excuse me. Thank you, Justyna. Sorry, I'm losing my voice today. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to present today during this session with this great panel of speakers. I thank you for that great presentation, Justyna. I also wanted to mention that last year I had the opportunity to help lead, together with CNIDA and several other Peruvian ministries and leaders from AmeriGEO, the organization and the execution of the Peru 2021 Mapathon, which is our topic. So I also wanted to mention that every month I have this incredible opportunity to join the AmeriGEO Coordination Working Group. And I think it's important to mention this in this thematic conversation, that this group is comprised of members from 20 GEO countries, and at least 12 of those countries are participating in the decision-making process during those meetings. And in this group, we definitely work with thematic initiatives, of which the leads of those initiatives are always present. We think it's important to maintain consistency with those leads for those thematic projects. So, today I have the honor of speaking about the role of the Mapathon as a stepping stone towards forming Peru's national GEO, and the ways that it's kind of paved a path in the region towards greater equity and inclusion. So the Mapathon Peru 2021 was a project that was organized by CNIDA, which is Peru's space agency, and the GEO Principal Organization, and they brought together several diverse Peruvian national ministries and organizations to the table to form the committee for organizing this Mapathon event, which was the very first event of its kind here in Peru, and it was one major step towards forming the Peru GEO. And this event was especially significant for Peru because it commemorated the bicentennial celebration of the nation for its independence. And the event served as an opportunity for this committee to leverage the use of Earth observations and Peru's very own PeruSat-1 platform as a means to bring together the national, regional, local actors from the government, from universities, from other private and public organizations, and to provide this platform for all of these people to contribute to the dialogue in the use of Earth observations here in Peru. So over the course of the 5 days of the event, we had more than 600 participants in the event, and they produced over 55,000 map structures in key vulnerable regions here. We had 6 dashboards and applications that were aimed towards improving the automation of processes in disaster event response. And 6 of those winning teams were comprised of students and professionals, and they were awarded and offered a place in the GeoPathways Latino America initiative. So for the GeoPathways Latino America initiative, this group is comprised of 23 students and young professionals across Peru and Latin America, as well as a number of mentors and leaders that are representing AmeriGEO. And this program has offered a really unique opportunity for young people in the Americas to collaborate with leaders and professionals in their region on projects that can make an impact for their community. And it gives them an outlet to demonstrate and use their skills and voice their ideas for finding solutions to key issues within their region. So as an example, in response to Peru's recent oil spill north of the capital city of Lima, the students came together, the students and the participants in the group came together to create a survey tool that assisted in the effort of determining the spread of the oil spill by providing local residents on the coast, business owners, fishermen, an outlet to report sightings of oil and affected flora and fauna. The program has been an opportunity for students and young professionals to really build their skills and professional networks, but it's also served as a platform for youth to voice their unique perspectives on current issues in the region. And it's given them tools and resources to work towards finding solutions. So before I move on from the topic of GeoPathways, I just wanted to quickly thank Stuart for your kind remarks in relation to our GeoPathways program. And I want to thank GEO, AmeriGEO, USGS, and FGDC for their leadership in promoting these opportunities for students across the region. So from my perspective, one of the most important outcomes and takeaways from this Mapathon event was demonstrating that we can promote equity and inclusion in this arena through the use of virtual media. So given the nature of the Mapathon as a virtual event, we were able to open participation in the event to virtually anyone in the world, no matter how remote their location. So here in Peru, there's often a disproportionate number of educational or professional opportunities in the capital city of Lima compared to the provinces. So with the virtual Mapathon event, we were able to offer the chance to participate to anyone with a computer or even a smartphone and an internet connection. So people who otherwise wouldn't have been able to travel and participate in a live in-person event. This was really a unique opportunity to engage students, professors, policymakers, professionals, service providers from small or remote towns in places like right here in the Andes or in the Peruvian Amazon, and connect them with those who are living in major cities like Lima, Arequipa. And it was so neat to see them all work together on the same teams. And for these teams to work on, the teams that were working on applications for the automation of processes related to DRR, they had an opportunity to really highlight some issues from their very own locality or region in the Mapathon. So we hope that this Mapathon and others could serve as a model to kind of decentralize opportunities that are usually made available strictly in urban centers like Lima, and open up the option to participate via virtual media tools, give more opportunity and equity for others who don't live in those areas. So through the Mapathon, we were able to engage with both national and international commercial entities as sponsors and service providers for the events. And we were able to highlight the need for access to data and technology resources in the region. And including national commercial entities, we were able to really promote awareness of the presence of these regional capacities and resources, and more broadly connect these entities with potential users. And we were able to really build, partnerships with Amazon, OGC, Esri, Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, and all of these, international entities became involved in the event and really bridged the gap as far as providing those services. So as mentioned previously, the Mapathon was a really important step in uniting the Earth observations community here in Peru. And it garnered interest in supporting the use of Peru's very own PeruSat-1, increasing transparency to the Peruvian public around the importance and the potential use of this tool. And it created really a lot of momentum towards the establishment of EuroGEO with the support of the community behind them. So moving forward, EuroGEO is organizing currently a second Mapathon event for later this year with the support of GeoPathways Latino America and a focus on national disaster risk management and the use of PeruSat-1 data. So through this event, EuroGEO plans to really involve at a deeper level national universities and other organizations, and really have a farther reach into our community and really include a more diverse group of organizations and communities. So we'll include in this event, workshops, learning opportunities. Of course, those are all virtually presented for remotely based participants. And the GeoPathways Latin America participants in our group currently are serving as a voice for their own regions because they come from all over the country, and they plan to promote the event and increase engagement from their community. So the hope is that these Mapathons will encourage additional events and opportunities across the globe to promote increasingly more diversity, equity, and inclusion within the EO global community. So as I'm wrapping this up, I did want to thank General Garcia, who is the AmeriGEO co-chair, for all of his support in helping us put on the Mapathon and the Mapathon for this year as well. So thank you, everybody. That's the end of my presentation. If you have any.
Thank you very much, Amber, for that presentation. It was definitely a great illustration of inclusion of various groups, and especially trying to bridge those gaps in areas that usually have less access. Based on that, we actually have a question for you from Mark Urban, which is, do you feel that connectivity or lack thereof might have been an issue for the Mapathon for complete and efficient coverage?
Say that again, Justyna.
Do you feel that connectivity or lack thereof may have been an issue for the Mapathon in order to have complete and efficient coverage?
Yes, I still think that, there's obviously still regions that we weren't able to reach. And so we're with our group of GeoPathway students, trying to find ways to make that reach go even further. There's always the limit of access to internet, even here in the city of Cusco where I live. Sometimes internet access is on and off, and so that is definitely a barrier, a technological barrier that, that we look at and we try to find ways to work around, for sure.
Great, thank you very much for that, Amber. We'll now be moving on to our final speaker, who is James Rattling Leaf Sr. James currently serves as a cultural intelligence consultant, and he is also a founding member of the GEO Indigenous Alliance that was established in 2019. James will be speaking to us today about the GEO Indigenous Alliance and best practices for Indigenous engagement. With that, James, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Justyna. And let me begin in a traditional Lakota greeting by saying how Midakiapi Chante Washten Napechu Zapalo, James Rattling Leaf, Imachapi Nasi Changa Lakota Oyate, Mataha, Iuhan Chante Napechu Zapalo. I greet you today with a handshake from my heart. And as indicated, my name is James Rattling Leaf. I'm a citizen of the Rosebud Sioux tribe. And I'm really happy to be with you today and to be part of this discussion and this presentation. I want to begin with our vision, as this indicated earlier. This GEO Indigenous Alliance effort began in 2019, and it came with a strong vision. It was really at the meeting in Canberra, Australia, and with a number of Indigenous colleagues, we came together and said, we need to get involved. We need to participate in GEO, and so we came up with this vision of really working together to strengthen our culture, strengthen our cultural heritage using Earth observation, data science, and technology. So our focus is on women and youth empowerment. I'm really glad to hear the previous presenters talk about the role of youth, in particular from indigenous communities. We believe that climate action and food security is also part of our focus. Disaster risk resilience, again, the impacts of disasters on indigenous people has been well documented. And I know that we've worked hard to put together information for the world and how we best address those issues. And finally, I think one of the really emerging topics that I'm really anxious to talk about and to continue to build upon is the idea of indigenous data sovereignty. It's a real issue among indigenous nations. How do we protect our data? How do we share our data? And what are things that we can do in terms of policy and research and education we can do to go forward? So we do have pathways. We do have a process that we look at to do this work. One of the things that I think is unique about indigenous people is that we really value our elders. And so we have this continuum from elders to youth. And it's important that we develop and continue to use our ways to share that knowledge, whether that's a traditional ecological knowledge or that's Earth observation data. We believe in partnerships. That's why we're here today, to share what we're doing and to share how we might go about it. I think partnerships are based on trust. Progress moves at the speed of trust is one of the things I've heard. And I believe that. We'll continue to do that. I think in order to do this work, we need a strong indigenous workforce. How do we participate in these programs if we do not have a good indigenous workforce, and even a future where our young people and others can get trained and learn how to use these tools? Again, conservation and stewardship of indigenous land is a big topic. If you paid attention this past year from the different conferences like COP26 and others, there's a big push really to engage indigenous people around conservation. So we believe that Earth observation is a key tool to do that work. And finally, I think we want to do this work together. And I think in one way we do that is an indigenous process. And so we think that sharing and developing guidelines of how we do this work is really important. We believe that in order to do that, there's been great work already established, like the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP they call it. And that's a strategic document, strategic framework of how we do work together. And we want to see more and more of that work implemented and processed, and continue to promote that through our work as well. So in our pathways, we've heard a lot about engagement and youth and nation states and things. We want to make sure that when we work together, these are our objectives: to establish safeguards for community participants. GEO community needs to understand indigenous rights, illegal rights. Again, co-design has been mentioned before. We want to make sure that's appropriate for our cultures and each individual culture that we work with. And finally, we want to look at this idea of care principles working around data. It's important that we understand and do these things in appropriate ways. So we do have a strategy. We've been working with our core group here and around the country to really look at some things that are important. And so training is a big one. Capacity development is still a big one for us. How do we do that? Again, we think that we're a small group right now. We're all volunteers, but we need to expand and grow and scale up. So we want to build and develop an advisory group of other indigenous leaders. Again, our efforts to do this work within GEO community involves these guidelines and how we do this work together. And finally, in order to do this work, we want to understand how we're doing. We want to understand the impact of our work. And so we're working to develop an assessment, impact assessment, and how the work that we do in terms of training, research, education, even things like hackathons, are we making a difference in indigenous communities? So that's the question that we have then is, are we ready? Are we ready to work with indigenous people? And I challenge you in a good way. That's the question that's before us again, is that indigenous people have an important role to play in the whole global things going to the future. We've heard that from many leaders, world leaders across the world. There's investments in that now. And if we want to continue that, we want to be a part of that. And we want to make sure that indigenous people have the opportunity to work with GEO. So that's the question. That's my contact information. I even got a fancy Twitter handle. So you guys are welcome to share that, tweet that. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you all very much.
James, thank you so much for that presentation. It's really great to see some of the steps in the process that you're recommending here. You also touched base on the need for capacity development and the very important role of the CARE principles and the importance that GEO needs to pay attention to indigenous data sovereignty. So all excellent points. I do note your question here to the community. Is the community ready to engage? And I guess the question I also have for you, seeing as we're now developing newer program especially, is how can indigenous knowledge guide GEO activities and become a more embedded part of the GEO work program?
Well, that's a great question. And I know one thing that is happening here in the States, and I've been get to be part of some conversations about the role of inclusion of indigenous knowledge and federal decision making here in America. And there'll be guidelines developed. And I know we hosted a listening session with the White House here on that process. You know, what I'm hearing from our indigenous nations here is that we do want to do that. We do want to share our knowledge, but also we want to make sure that there are guidelines and safeguards for that knowledge. It is a complex issue in many ways of how we share our knowledge with the world. We've done that. But we also know that we're in unprecedented times. You know, we mentioned the disaster risk reduction work. You know, we understand that those things impact our tribal nations, but we also know that that we really want a seat at the table. You know, we really want to be part of decision making going forward, just because, you know, we believe that we're a major player in this whole work around the world, and how for instance, we work with conservation. So there's a great interest, there's a great need to include indigenous knowledge in this work. My thing is that we have to look at the UNDRIP principles again of how we do that work. That work's been supported by many indigenous nations across the world. It's been established, it's been supported. And I think taking a hard look at implementation of that, because that can help address how we do inclusion of indigenous knowledge. So thank you for the question.
Thank you for that, James, and the presentation. So we have now reached our final presentation. Before we move on to the discussion portion, I would like to launch the concluding poll question, if you wouldn't mind advancing to that slide. And the question is, how do you feel about the following statement? And please indicate your response here. I feel included in my engagement in GEO, and I am treated as an equal and valuable participant. Wenbo, if you could please launch the poll. And everyone, please participate in the poll. We will be moving on to discussion. You'll have a few minutes to still respond. So we would appreciate your participation. We will go through the results of both questions at the end of our discussion session. Thank you. And if you could now perhaps just go into the next portion of our session, which will be the panel discussion. So with that, we have all speakers with your cameras on, please. Thank you all again for the engaging discussion so far. It's definitely been a very rich set of perspectives and contributions. For those of you in the audience, please feel free to add your questions in the chat. They'll be directed to the whole panel. If you have a question for someone specifically, please note that as well. And for opening, perhaps I could just ask that, you know, there were many synergies within your presentations, and many of you spoke about the importance of regional GEOs and national GEOs in advancing equity, diversity, inclusion across GEO. What best practices would you offer to those engaged at the regional level for advancing EDI? And perhaps I will hand that one off to Bente first to kick us off.
Yes, thank you very much, Justyna. Indeed, there's a red thread through the presentations, I feel. The capacity, the link between capacity development and EDI, I think is very, very strong and perhaps under used. I mentioned briefly the webinars we did have in the Inspire hackathons, but indeed webinars, and particularly now since we couldn't meet physically, has been and I think it will continue to be an efficient way of engaging and including all participants in GEO. Now, I think, well, Stuart, when we went through the regional geos, of course, the mention of not everybody has internet connection. That is one of the issues that that needs to be addressed, of course. And so physical meetings will still be an important part of our activities. Thank you.
Thanks, Bente. That's a great point on co-design. I think I've seen that in capacity development. I think I've seen that resonate throughout the presentations, that we can't talk about inclusion without mentioning capacity development as well. Would others from the panel like to comment as well?
I mean, maybe if I could briefly come in.
Please.
I think there were examples of best practice in all 4 regions. And when Bente and I had the conversations with the regional groupings, you know, they all surprised us with something they said, and they were taking a lead in an area. So if we think about language, then there was the introduction of Spanish translation in AmeriGEO, and that was very widely appreciated. And then they were starting to think about whether there could be capacity to include other languages. So that's just one example where they were perhaps a little bit ahead of some of the other regions. They'd actually done something about the problem. Other regions perhaps were just recognizing the problem, or in the case of Europe saying, well, mostly in Western Europe we all speak English, but yeah, I can imagine it maybe is a problem for our Eastern colleagues, and but then what do you do about that? So I think, you know, there were good examples in all 4 cases where they were doing something really positive. And I think one of the things that can come out of the work is for us to share that best practice more widely.
Thank you for that, Stuart. And I see a follow-up question here, which is, what specific aspects of the AmeriGEO platform and dashboard do you envision being shared with other regional geos? The training platform, or the data hub, or the communities of practice, or all?
Well, I think that discussion remains to be had. So we've just had a sort of a sneak preview in our discussions with them, and it certainly looks very interesting. And I think all 3 of those aspects have the potential to be shared more widely. It's something that none of the other regions were doing. So I think let's have that discussion and see where it takes us. But I think in principle, all 3 of those areas have something to offer.
Thank you for that, Stuart. And I wonder, Amber, did you want to chime in here, because that was very relevant to the work you were doing with the Peru Mapathon and all your engagement in Latin America?
Sure. Excuse me. I think as far as our experience with you know, engaging the region, engaging Peru in forming their national GEO, some of the lessons learned, I think it was really important to have the involvement of you know, the ministries, the local and regional governments, and to really get the community involved. And I think that we kind of hit both of those objectives with the Mapathon by, you know, engaging the remote communities, engaging you know, the students and young professionals, the policymakers, et cetera, all of those people in this one event. And then also providing language support as well for the different languages that are spoken in our region. So, and then the virtual, of course, you know, the virtual delivery of the event. So I think that an event like the Mapathon could be a really important, you know, kind of stepping stone to, you know, for other geos that are kind of moving towards a national geo, or other countries that are moving towards a national geo to maybe consider an event like this to bring, you know, the entire community together and give everybody a voice. And also, I wanted to mention that Dr. Sophia Liu is on the line, and she is another person who helped build the GEO Pathways program and really was a strong support in the Mapathon. So she might have a comment for some of these questions as well, because she really did have a lot of great contributions for both the Mapathon and the GEO Pathways program.
Great, thank you, Amber. The Mapathon's been an excellent example of, you know, practical application of how to advance a national geo, and especially some of the issues you talked about with the language barriers and the virtual participation. And Sophia, please feel free to jump in on the conversation. In the meantime, I would also like to pose another question to the group, which is, I know the GEO community is now in the process of developing the next work program for 2023-2025 and looking to develop GEO's vision beyond 2025. How do we ensure that Indigenous youth and other underrepresented voices are engaged and in and embedded from the start in the activities of the GEO work program and in GEO as an organization? What advice would you offer for meaningful, reciprocal, and respectful engagement? And perhaps I could hand that one off to James to start us off.
Well, that's an easy one. Funding. Can I say that again? Funding. I think that's the biggest barrier at this point, including indigenous people with this work. So that's the takeaway message. As Yana listening, seriously, though, I do think that to really bring indigenous youth to these places, to this opportunities, is supporting them, financially. And I think that's the first one. Again, I think really looking at this idea again of really looking at traditional knowledge again, and really aspects of really aligning ourselves well with current thinking, current efforts within the United Nations and some of those other activities. And I think also is relevant types of applications, things that really matter to indigenous community. One of the things that I think is important is, this is the beginning. This decade is the decade of indigenous languages. And I know we've talked about English and we talked about Spanish, but I think any kind of applications around support of this work has to include indigenous languages in some way. That's a real threat to our people worldwide. And we got to figure out ways to support that doing this kind of work. Finally, I would say is, looking at a different kind of economy in terms of development, indigenous communities. I mentioned funding, but it has to lead to something else in terms of aligning well with indigenous values when it comes to economies and developing mechanisms in place that can support communities. I think we're looking for different economic models that can work and can help advance communities. So there's a process here, I believe, that we can do. And again, the GEO Indigenous Alliance, stands ready to work on these things together. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I think we'll all be counting on the GEO Indigenous Alliance to help guide us through that. And I recall Titus's presentation yesterday with the example of a hackathon that was very much relevant to using, community relevant symbols and language. So that's another key point for us to keep in mind. And I see that Florian has raised his hand next.
Thank you, Justyna. And also to add this on the onboarding and the preparation for the next GeoWork program. A few weeks ago, I joined a webinar from AquaWatch GeoActivity, and they had a special dedicated session on early career and PhD student on water quality. And one of the very interesting aspects came out is that even though the community is organized, etc., still when you have new people contributing or early career scientists, the key is transparency and the need to have, I would say, knowledge sharing, not only on the technical aspects, the tools, the data, the service, but also to how the organization, the project, the institution works. And this is something that I think is key if in the next work program aim at having a more diverse set of
Thank you, Florian. I think transparency is critical, as you said, and just understanding among the community of how to best involve, get engaged, and having that diversity of perspectives. I see Bente, you have your hand up.
Yes, very quickly following up what you said, James, on funding. One of the techniques of incorporating EDI can be learned from how we are incorporating gender in the framework program, for instance. And my experience from the Research Council of Norway with funding is also that it's, you incorporate these perspectives in the call. So for the GEO work program, for instance, it could be that we were more explicit when we are asking for suggestions for new activity to make sure that EDI is being included. That's for internally in our project, which again, in our work program, and which again can be communicated to funding agencies. And many of the organizations engaged in GEO are also funding agencies.
Thank you, Bente. I think it's an excellent point on that kind of early inclusion and understanding the factors from the beginning. I wonder, Ummul, if I could ask you to chime in from your perspective in Tanzania, with your conservation efforts trying to engage women and youth. Would you be willing to chime in on that? Well, I'm not sure if you can hear me okay, but if you would like to add anything to the discussion, please do so. I see that we have, just FYI for everyone, we are about to close the second poll. So if you have not had a chance to do so, please go ahead. And I see that Angelica would like to take the floor with a question. Angelica, please go ahead.
Thank you, Justyna. And here, just wanted to thank you to the, but also I have seen a lot of questions about sharing. And so I want to let everybody know that everything that we do can be shared. In fact, we are already in conversation with some of our partners, AmeriGEO, seeing how we can assist them from share our lessons learned. I also want to recognize all these efforts are not from yesterday. These efforts actually started many, many years ago. And I'm sorry, Stuart, but I'm going to mention a very specific name, Ivan the Lodge, who has been a pioneer in everything related to, all this software, all this development in this capacity. So Ivan retired a couple of months ago, and we are missing him enormously, but we are very grateful for all his contributions. And again, everything in AmeriGEO is open. We will be more than happy to assist and support other interested parties, like other regions.
Thank you for that, Angelica. And we've been seeing comments here about the need to share our EDI principles with others and those lessons learned. So thank you for that.
Can I just say that the name Ivan Deloach did not come up, but I'm not at all surprised that it perhaps should have done. Very, very big respect for Ivan and all that he's done for GEO down the years, worked with him extensively, program board. So yeah, a lot of time for Ivan.
Yes, Ivan is here according to
He is.
to the screen. Ivan, can you show up?
Ivan, if you'd like to add something, please. We would welcome your input.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Angelica, for the shout out. And I really appreciate it. But it's very encouraging to see that you guys are continuing to do the good work in AmeriGEO. And I think it's an excellent model for implementing what we're trying to do within the global GEO and GEOS. So I know there's a number of other regions have recognized some of the best practices that we've implemented to take on board as well. And it's just, again, very encouraging to see the progress that's being made, especially in regards to inclusion. I think we all recognize that we're stronger when we have more diversity on all of it. And from its initial start in GEO, it was about inclusion and really reaching back and helping those who don't have the same level of capabilities that folk have both in the US and Europe and some other countries. So I think it's just great to see that there's a focus on this now. So excellent to see this is happening. And just thank you for an opportunity just to share a few comments.
Thanks for that, Ivan, and we're glad to have you participating. Thank you for your input and engagement over the years.
Thank you.
And I also see that Sophia Liu wanted to chime in here. I see a comment from you in the post. Perhaps you would like to share. These are some excellent points, Sophia.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, thank you, Amber, as well. I think you spoke very well of and gave a good summary of what occurred with the Peru Mapathon, and I was just about to send a link, although maybe you can do that as well, of the Mapathon. I had asked for that, and just our GEO Pathways program in general. It's been a great pleasure to support this program and see the variety of ways in which to engage not only the younger generation to be a part of supporting some of our activities, but also of using these participatory open techniques to engage the community as well as the commercial industry through private sector partnerships. A lot of the success of the Mapathon as well as our GEO Pathways program has been in collaborating with different industries in the private sector, such as Amazon and Esri, and as well as nonprofit organizations like the Open Geospatial Consortium. And it's really important to get the variety of voices, because that is where we can really explore using these mapathons or test pilots to really figure out how do we work through some of the challenges that we've come across, and not spend tons of money to try to figure that out, but actually do some real piloting and exploration, as well as really getting to network and do some fun activities together in a short period of time. So not only do things like mapathons help to engage folks, engage younger generation to help us solve some problems in a short period of time. It helps to get some in-kind resources. So funding sometimes is not about here's a bunch of money so we can do something, but it's everyone kind of contributing their time, money, resources, their intellect to work on some challenging problems, as well as just to meet people. And that's often why people participate in these activities. It's a great way to learn and broaden someone's professional and personal network, understand local issues as well as global issues, to engage in some fun activities. So hopefully that summarizes a little bit of my comments. And I do want to also echo what James was pointing out as well, is, in the Indigenous context, there are important things that we can learn from, and how sometimes we don't want to openly share everything, but being mindful of what we want to share and how we want to make use of this data. I think it's very important in some very challenging kind of circumstances where we need to be mindful of certain kinds of information and being mindful of how we use that information. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sophia. And that, raised some excellent points in terms of the examples that we already have, the lessons learned from the hackathons, how to really maximize those and perhaps develop the tools, lessons learned, and resources that we can then share and replicate across GEO, including the need to identify funding early on, but also the need to see how we best include others in the process of planning. And I see that Virginia Burkett would also like to make a comment. Please, Virginia.
I'm sorry. I was just going to tell you that Umi, I think, is able to speak now. You had a question for her earlier. That was all. Umi, can you hear us?
Thank you, Virginia. Umi, can you hear us okay?
Hey,
Excellent.
I'm there.
My question before was if you had any comments, especially on the ability to better, provide for inclusion for different groups across GEO, especially in your experience in conservation efforts with women in Tanzania, please.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Actually, you are very right. We young women in Tanzania, because I'm here, I'm speaking about Tanzania. We are very challenged. So I think like GEO Mapathon, our session like this really help us because it makes more experience. So that's why I suggested, and I do suggest to be more fit, like more training, more sessions, more Mapathon, and us young ladies to be engaged in those activities, to be more experienced and to get those opportunities, because when we get it once, twice, thrice, we become familiar with it. It is easier for us to even encourage others on GEO issues and activities. Sometimes we know what we want, but we don't know how to start. So when those kind of things, engagement, inclusion, come to us like opportunities, so we grab them and we can work with them to help us grow more. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Amy, and it definitely speaks to the points that we made earlier about the need to really link capacity development with inclusion, that you can't really have one without the other, without the ability to gain this kind of experience, provide engagement early on. So thank you for that point. I do have one perhaps final question as we're nearing towards the end of our time now for the entire panel, really, which is that the GEO Equity, Diversity, Inclusion subgroup has looked to characterize EDI across GEO, looking at data on engagement and where improvements are needed. In your own experience, can you please comment on any structural barriers that you may have identified to fuller and more inclusive participation across GEO, and thoughts you have on what GEO can do to address these? Would anyone like to start?
Yeah, this is James Rattling Leaf. I want to say again, advocate for really looking at sort of what's happening in indigenous nations efforts and how GEO as a community can maybe better align with those issues as appropriate. Again, I'm reminded by those elders, indigenous elders, who again remember the progress that was made to really develop these engagement principles, again, like UNDRIP. And that's one of the things that I think that's important in terms of going forward. Reconciliation is another big word. I want to just make a point here too. The importance of reconciling the things that have happened to indigenous people, and how this community, again, through the use of its research and its problem-solving ability and creating more opportunity for our young people, can address those issues that affect us as indigenous people. So it's really about reconciliation, again, to ourselves, reconciliation to the land. And I think those values, again, have to be considered in anything we do. How does indigenous values come into the work programming? How does indigenous values get respected? How do we build those relationships with one another so that those values can be implemented, can be practiced, and travel in indigenous nations can be stronger going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, James. I think those are all very important principles for us to keep in mind as we move forward, especially on the co-design, the respectful engagement and the reconciliation as well. But would anyone else have any comments, Jaffer?
I think language is a massive challenge, and we didn't think about that going into our discussions with the regional groupings, but we're certainly thinking about it coming out the other side. I remember in the predecessor organization, GEO, the so-called Integrated Global Observing Strategy, we used to have simultaneous translation in all our meetings, but even that is only into a limited number of languages. I think we need to grapple with what we can do about, I mean, James mentioned indigenous languages, right? So that's a whole additional set that we need to think about beyond perhaps just some of the main languages globally. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do think we probably will need to grapple with this. And I don't think it's going to be good enough to say, oh, well, we can stick with English. Because I think if you do that, it pre-selects a certain group of people that are then able to interact with you, and it excludes almost automatically a huge range of other people who will not be able to interact with you. So I think we need to find ways around the language thing. That would be something very practical if it was possible by automatic systems or whatever, to do something about that. I think that would be a big step forward.
I'll just follow up on what Stuart said. I think that was one of our major conclusions. And we also discussed some of the ways that we could do that language translation without immense need of funding by using the community itself. Because I remember, since I was part of the GEO communities since the very beginning, I remember we were discussing this, that this would be too expensive, right? That was one of the issues. But now, with new tools like artificial intelligence, being able to translate more or less good, but after all, translation for free, and using the resources we have from the communities with individuals. I see this, even so, I come from Norway, and in Norway we are quite fluent in English. We are, comfortable speaking English. But even here, I have noticed that language is a barrier for more extensive use in Norway. It's the younger ones who are a little bit shy, who doesn't have, it takes some time to be fluent in another language and to capture all the different dialects and accents. And you also have people who are a little bit older who are also shy, don't feel too comfortable speaking. So I think this is for transparency and for better inclusiveness. I think language would be one of the top things that we should have.
Thank you, Bente. That's definitely been a recurring theme I think we've heard throughout the session and others. And perhaps, as you said, some of the previous barriers we had, perhaps they can now be somewhat lowered due to technology change, and we can see what other tools we have offered to hopefully bridge that gap. Are there any other final comments? I see Florian, go ahead for the last
Yes,
point.
very quickly, I want to echo on what has been said just now, and about the need to build ownership, because when you arrive in the GEO community, it's so impressive because you have so many incredible projects and activities, and you see that the work is great, but how many people actually participate in these activities, and compared to how many people we see during these events present, only one or maybe for each topic, but in the end it turns out that you have 10, 50, many. So I think mentioning them, showing what they have done, letting them also present is something that will build ownership in the long term. GEO is less than 20 years old, so GEO is, let's say, a teenager, and if we want to have this in the longer term, we need to as many people, as many backgrounds, geographic coverage.
Thank you, Florian. That's an excellent point to make at the end, the importance of inclusion and really reaching out to those diverse audiences to make sure that we build that kind of robust, inclusive, and well-integrated GEO as a whole. With that, thank you to all the panelists and all the speakers and everyone in the discussion. It's been an excellent session. With that, I would like to go to the poll results if the GEO Secretary wouldn't mind sharing that real quick.
Rick, would you bring up the last slide? Okay, I'll
Sorry,
try.
give me a second, because I thought the presentations were over. I thought it was using the, go ahead.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay.
And this would be the Wordle based on the first question. In terms of, in one word, how would you define EDI and GEO? And I see lots of opportunity is coming out: democracy, balance, community, and freedom, unity, all kinds of great points. And certainly this would be a useful word for us to keep in mind later on as we look at EDI in GEO and what that means to everyone. And how about the second poll?
Can you see it now?
I do not, Wenbo.
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Okay. Right now?
I only see the results of the previous.
So now I can see the results of the closing.
Okay, takes a little bit time to come through?
Well, in the interest of time, as we wait for that to load, I would like to offer my sincere thanks again to our panel, to the EDI subgroup. Natalie Petrelli had a huge role in organizing this session, the GEO Secretariat for their work in putting this event together, behind the scenes work. We would certainly like to acknowledge several people for organizing this event, Gianna Mastracci, Maria Del Pilar Cornejo, Angelica Gutierrez, Ken Mubea, Clegg Arley, Wenbo, Julie Vunier, Rick Baines, and many others. So thank you all so much. And thank you to our wonderful speakers and our audience for participating. I am actually still not seeing the results. Should we take a group?
I can actually read out for you.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, so we have most of the answer is strongly agree or agree. We have a 40% of a strongly agree and a 42% of agree. Neither agree or disagree, 13% and 6% of a disagree.
Well, thank you for those results. Very informative. It's good to know we seem to be on the right track, but we of course have still additional work to do, which is the point of this session. And we look forward to working with one as we do this. I see some requests here to take a group picture. I don't know if the GEO Secretariat can accommodate that at all quickly.
Sure, but then needs everyone to turn on their camera.
So if everyone is feeling brave and can turn on your camera, we can take a quick photo. And then we'll need to close out this session as we are just at the end of our okay.
Next screen. We don't have many cameras on the second screen.
Yeah, for anyone that can, please turn your cameras on if you'd like to be in the.
Let me do a check. Yes, it's done.
Okay, great.
Thank you everyone so much. Appreciate your time and attention and all your input. And I believe the panel sessions are done for today, but please join us again tomorrow for the next day of the symposium. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Justyna. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.